Every company has two organizational charts. The one they show you and the one that actually runs the show. So if you want to lead, really lead, you have to learn how to read the shadow organization. The real power isn't written down in an org chart. It lives in alliances, influence, back channels, and quiet conversations after the meeting ends.
Today, we are unpacking one of the most complex leadership questions. How do you navigate power, politics, and influence without losing your voice or your sense of self, especially as a woman leader? And to help us go deep, we are joined by somebody who does not just talk about equity, she challenges the systems behind it. It's Thana Balasingam, the architect of raw leadership, co-founder of Reinvent, as well as the Lean In Network in Singapore. She is a fierce advocate for women in leadership and a relentless builder of space where power is shared and not just hoarded. Welcome to the show, Uma. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So let's start at the very beginning, Uma. What led you to become so passionate about the work that you're doing now? What has been your journey and what brought you to where you stand at this point in time?
I grew up across the border in Johor Bahru, Malaysia, which is the city that connects Malaysia to Singapore over a causeway, and not being able to convince my parents to build a career as a pianist, I put myself through university, started as an engineer, and then led multi-billion-dollar tech businesses across Asia Pacific and Japan. Today, I'm a multi-hyphenate founder, and I build movements and companies centered around leadership, reinvention, and media. And I feel like I'm still on my journey, but that's kind of where I am today.
Any specific reason for particularly this focus on enabling women leaders find out their voice?
I remember when I was 25, living in Malaysia, and it was the last qualifying age to enter a beauty pageant. And so for fun, together with a best friend, we said, let's just do it for the fun of it and for the laughs. And in that program, I learned about many things that I wasn't taught. For example, as Indian women, we have a lot of hair on our hands and legs, and how to shave or even wax them, how to dress up for work. I wore pants for the first 10 years of my career because that's all I saw. And also how to present yourself and write your resume. All of the things that I had to figure out for myself. And I remember being in that room as part of this program, and I thought, I wonder how many other women don't get to be in this room and to get this information. And so I went on this path to pursue money and title and everything because it was important to me. And so as soon as I got all of that, I am coming back to the same question that I sat with in that room. And now I want to make everything that I know and learn to be accessible to everyone. So that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right. That's beautiful, Uma. And that's exactly the rich repository that we will all delve into today and perhaps share as much as we can with all the listeners who will be dialing in. So let's get straight into the first question, which has been intriguing me, is that as a senior HR person, I've seen women walk a tightrope. They're trying to be taken seriously without being labeled as being difficult. And whether we like it or not, that when it's coupled with the fact that there is workplace politics, something which exists whether we like it or not, how do you recommend women really walk this tightrope? Because you have seen it firsthand, not just as a leader in an extremely aggressive and stressful environment as a sales leader. So, how have you navigated this dynamics, and what are your perceptions about this political dynamics of organizations?
The pressure to be likable is real. But if you trade your power for approval, you lose both. As women, we're conditioned early to be likable, to smooth things over, to be agreeable, to not rock the boat. But every workplace, every single one, runs on politics. And politics isn't a dirty word. It's just how influence, resources, and decisions move behind the scenes. So how do you stay true to yourself while navigating that reality? First, I stopped making likability the goal. Initially, my goal was to make sure that everybody really wanted to spend time with me. They really liked me. And so I tried to change the shape of who I was. And that evolved to being respect, credibility, and impact as the goal, not constant approval. I think you can be kind without being a pushover, and you can be collaborative without disappearing. Second, recognizing that politics isn't about manipulation, it's about relationships and information flow. It's knowing who the real decision makers are. It's understanding the undercurrents. It's choosing your battles, not because you're weak, but because you are strategic. So when I first stepped into leadership roles, I tried to do everything right, make everyone comfortable, be the nice leader. And all it was doing was diluting my impact. And so the shift came when I realized I can be respected without being everyone's favorite. I can be human and have boundaries, and I can play the game without losing my soul in the process. So I look at authenticity not as broadcasting everything you think and feel, but aligning your actions with your values, which evolve over time as well. But even when it's inconvenient, even when it's political, I've learned that you don't have to choose between being real and being strategic, and the real power is when you are both.
Right, absolutely. Um, You mention a very important point that is actually provoking me also to think in a different way, is that politics to a great extent is about how information and resources are flowing in the organization, and how you are really um, ensuring that flow to some extent benefits you as well. I think that's a beautiful perspective of looking at potentially the not so flattering word, as we mentioned, as politics. That was great. Thank you for that, Uma. That brings me to the next question, is that um, no matter how much the needle has moved on this, there has been a lot of research around women leadership, gender, etc., etc. And it has been found that women may have the same formal authority and connections as men, but they always tend to have 30 to 40% less career enhancing support. And the numbers have not changed for the last 10, 15 years. And this makes me think about something that you beautifully call the shadow organization, which we were referring to in the previous question as well. Those informal power hubs. So, can you elaborate how you have experienced this shadow organization, and what's the best way of navigating it?
Absolutely. Every company has two organizational charts, the one they show you and the one that actually runs the show. So if you want to lead, really lead, you have to learn how to read the shadow organization. The real power isn't written down in an org chart. It lives in alliances, influence, back channels, and quiet conversations after the meeting ends. So the first step is observation. Pay attention to who people defer to when decisions are made. Watch who gets consulted behind the scenes. not just whose name is on the title. Notice whose opinions change the room, even when they're not the most senior person there. The second step is proximity. Access comes from building strategic relationships, not just with your direct boss, but with the influencer, the glue people, the unspoken gatekeepers. It's about offering value before you ask for anything. It's about being in rooms, in conversations where real decisions are shaped, not just finalized. When I was navigating leadership, the biggest unlock was realizing I didn't have to be invited into the shadow organization. I was waiting for this and I didn't have to. I had to earn my way in through credibility, consistency, and being the person people trusted when stakes were high. And so, what does that look like? You do exactly what you say you're going to do, and then you tell them you did it, and then you show them that you did it. For women, especially, it's not about playing games or pretending to be someone else. It's about understanding the game that's already being played and choosing how to show up inside it without losing your voice. You don't dismantle a system you don't understand. And you can't change the rules until you know exactly where the real power lives. And I show you exactly how to do this in my course, From Outsider to Insider, First Moves Edition, on navigating workplace politics. So check out the link in the show notes.
Absolutely. And I think nobody can emphasize how critical this is. I mean, this is something each and every woman leader has mentioned. So, for example, a couple of days back, I was listening to Indira Nuya, and she says that become that one person that everybody falls back upon if the work has to be done. And she said that earlier on in the career, she often got invited into meetings where she wouldn't typically belong, but because of what she would bring on the table. So, Uma, now that we are on this topic for especially women leaders who are struggling with this, you mentioned it already, but still, one or two quick tips to keep in mind that you don't have to play dirty, but you have to create that impact. What would be just one or two things that they can take and just put it on their softboard in front of their computer?
So I would say notice in meetings that you are in how decisions are subtly being made. And these are typically not the people that summarize the meetings. Who are the people that hold the big titles deferring to? And think about who they are copying in emails, who they are deferring to when they make decisions, who they are saying sometimes that I'm going to check with so and so. Sometimes it's more than one person. Those are the people you need to start networking with, because I think a lot of times we want to try and network with the people that hold the big titles, certainly what I did. And we forget this shadow organization who are huge influencers, and it's where resources and budgets and headcounts, etc. These are the paths of people that it moves through, and that's where the power is held.
Right. Thank you for that. Now, coming to a corollary from there is the entire concept of networking. You know, again, it's been proven that women are less likely than men to have diverse network, and it can be various of reason. Number one is scarcity of time, cultural conditioning, whatever the reason is. As someone who has built great communities across geographies, how would you invest in building the right network, not a big network, the right network, keeping the political dynamics, everything that a woman needs to keep in mind, both inside and outside the organization? How would you go about creating the community, as well as some recommendation for leaders to invest in the right networks?
Yeah, that's such an important question. The most powerful leaders aren't just smart, they are visible to the right people before they ever need anything. So, building a network isn't about collecting names, it's about strategically investing in relationships that amplify your credibility, your visibility, and your opportunities long before you need them. So, where does it matter most? I would say upward, outward, and sideways. Upward is with decision makers and influencers who can open doors that you can't open alone. Outward is across industries, so you're not trapped in a single company or sector's vision of you. And sideways, these are peers who grow into future CEOs or founders or board members. These are quiet compounding bets that you make today that shapes tomorrow's tables. And here's the real key. You don't invest in a network by constantly asking for things. You must give first. You invest by adding value first. Sharing insights, making connections, celebrating others' wins genuinely, or even just commenting on people's LinkedIn posts at least 10 times before you should even be messaging them. People remember how you show up when you have nothing to gain. And so when I reflect on the biggest moves in my own career, the promotions, the invitations, the opportunities, they didn't happen because I was sitting quietly hoping to be noticed because I did all of that and it didn't work. They happened because I was building real relationships behind the scenes, showing up when it wasn't about me. I think visibility isn't vanity, which is what most women think it to be. It's leadership. And the leaders who understand how to build meaningful strategic networks, they don't just survive change because this is a constant in the world that we live in now as it relates to work and life. They shape it. So think about this as you start building meaningful strategic networks, but do it in your own way. Don't feel the pressure to do it in the way that others do because you must protect your energy and what is true to you. So shape what that looks like for yourself.
Um, that was great, Uma. And what I loved was that practical aspect that you built in on how to go about it. But can you really help me unpack this entire thing that you mentioned? Give first before you expect anything in return. So, can you give any specific concrete examples, either from your life or whatever you've seen, uh, a person started a relationship with a true sense of giving? What did that look like? And how did that really convert into something phenomenal?
Yes. So it's so important to give before you take because people need to see you, firstly. That can be on platforms, that can be in person. It doesn't matter, but they need to know you exist. I think it's very shocking for me when I receive direct messages on LinkedIn where people straight out ask for a job or they ask me to comment on a post or they want my time to meet. And I don't know who you are. And why should I give you the time? And this is exactly what most people are thinking. So giving, I think when I say this word, it's important to remember that it's not about big contributions. It can look like, for example, I was at this annual mega walk that I organized as part of being the founder of Lean in Singapore, which is a community of 7,000 that I've built over 9 years in collaboration with Mentor Walks. We hold a mega walk every single year. Last year, a young woman came up to me. She introduced herself and she said, Uma, you don't know me, but I know you. And I know you have a powerful network in tech, and I'm trying to break in to get my first opportunity, and I haven't had much success. Would you be willing to introduce me to your network? This sounds like a question a lot of people get typically, especially senior executives. So I looked at her and I said exactly what I would say to anyone else asking me the same question. I said, I can't introduce you to my network because that's a form of sponsorship. And I'm putting my reputation on the line. And I can't do that for someone I haven't had a positive working experience with. And 99% of the time, most people would walk away and go, I completely understand. Thank you. But she had a comeback. She said, what would it take for me to have a positive working experience with you? And at that time, I was about to organize this event on women and workplace politics for my lean-in community. And I needed a volunteer because we're nonprofit and we're volunteer run to lead the entire organization of the event. So I tell her about this. She says yes without hesitation. She executed flawlessly. She made things easier for me. I got to see her in action. And then she did another event, but I wouldn't hesitate. And then I did it. I opened up her name to more than 200 people in the C-level community that I have. But that's an example of giving before expecting to take.
Right, right. That's beautiful. And what I love is it gives a complete clarity, because that's something that lots of people I've come across in these various networking events, they grapple with. That was a great example. Now, we move into the other point of sponsorship, as you rightly mentioned when you were talking about this particular example. Again, I mean, I have seen these examples really play out in front of my eyes. Often, women and men, they have the same number of mentors, but what happens is men end up having 50% more sponsors for themselves for whatever reasons. And that ends up being a great accelerator or something that stalls the career of women. So, sponsorship and not mentorship is actually the real game changer. You've been in these rooms, you have been sponsors yourself, as well as you've had great sponsors. So, what do you feel? Why do women still struggle to find sponsors, and how do we make the needle move on that?
Such an important question. So there are two workplace currencies, your performance currency and your relationship currency. Mentors give you advice as it relates to the relationship currency, but sponsors is the most important one. Sponsors bet their reputation on you, and that changes everything. Sponsorship is a different game. A mentor will guide you, a sponsor will fight for you when you're not in the room. They will put your name on the table when opportunities are being handed out, not just when advice is being given. But here's the truth. Sponsorship isn't given out of generosity, like most mentorship is. It's earned through credibility, visibility, and trust. If women want more sponsorship, it starts with being seen as someone worth betting on. That means delivering results that are 101%, even 110%. Your results have to be undeniable. It means taking ownership of the outcomes and not just the effort. It means making sure the right people know about the impact that you're making, not assuming it speaks for itself, because it doesn't. So you earn sponsorship by building trust over time, by showing up prepared, by delivering when it matters the most, by making your sponsor look wise and good, not just kind, for backing you. And most importantly, you make it easy for someone to sponsor you. If you don't articulate your ambitions clearly, people can't help you. They can't open a door you haven't told them that you want to walk through. So when I look back, the biggest career leaps I made weren't because I was waiting to be noticed, because I did try that and it didn't work. It's because I made my work undeniable and made my goals visible. I was going around telling everybody I wanted to be CEO. And so to the people who would change my trajectory, they heard that. And I've learned that sponsorship isn't luck, it's strategy. And it starts with believing you are worthy of being in the room and making it easy for someone to throw the door open for you, wide open.
Um, Two things that I would like to really dig a little deep into it. One very strong theme you mentioned is that first, I need to think that I am worthy of this. And that's the first step I've seen a lot of women struggle with, and which shouldn't be the case at this point in time in 2025. I mean, we've seen with our education, with our exposure, with our support, it shouldn't be the case. So, what should we do better to at least take away the first question that, am I worthy? Should I even be there? What should we do to just take that off the table?
Am I worthy? Do I deserve to be here? Do I have anything to say that's worth listening to? These are all the questions that I grappled with very early in my career. And that's because I grew up learning that I needed to listen and not speak. And when I ended up taking all of that into the corporate world, it just simply didn't work. I worked really hard. I stayed at my desk. I kept my head down. And I was hoping that people would notice me and promote me and give me the opportunities that I deserve. But it just didn't work that way for me. And I came from this place of undeserving default, so much so that every single opportunity that came my way, I felt grateful for it. In fact, I didn't even think I was worthy to negotiate more sometimes, right? So I had to force myself to learn how to ask. And I got a chance to do that in my very first interview when I was a fresh graduate out of university. I went for my systems engineer role. And at that time, the market rate was 1,800 ringgit in Malaysia, which is like 500 US dollars. My friends already had jobs, so I kind of knew the market rate. I was offered the job on the spot, and I was so desperate to sleep in my own bed. I was sleeping on the floor on single mattresses, and I wanted my own bed. I wanted my own room, and it was going to cost me 400 ringgit more. So I
Mm.
looked at the general manager offering me this job, and I said, no, you're going to offer me 2,200 ringgit out of desperation. And I think he was so shocked that this fresh graduate was negotiating with him that he said, okay. And so that was my lesson. And ask and you shall most likely receive. And suddenly I was like, oh, I was worthy of 2,200 ringgit, not 1,800 ringgit. And so for the rest of my career, I just always asked because I feel like if you don't ask, you don't give an opportunity for the other party to even consider saying yes to you.
Right. That's so beautiful and that's so strong. Um, Another thing from the previous point you'd mentioned when we were talking about sponsorship, that you just don't have to make your sponsor look kind and good. You need to make him or her look wise and credible. Can you just unpack that a little bit for us? The reason being, every relationship is a give and take. You are expecting a lot from the sponsor, and rightly, as you mentioned, the sponsor is expecting certain things from us. So, what is this difference between kind and wise, and how do we navigate the path?
The best way to make your sponsor look wise is by making them look like they made the right decision to back you up. And it can show up in a couple of ways in my own experience. First, I had a CEO that backed my hire as a vice president in my last tech job. And when I went into the company, I knew that this CEO was very passionate about a specific area that he was giving back, that he sat on the board of a very specific company. And so when he was organizing a charity dinner to raise money for that organization, I spoke to my boss to get my company at the time to buy a table to support that CEO. And so that was in support of him, and it was something we were clearly aligned to as part of our values and something we wanted to support, not something we just did on a whim. So I made him look wise because I got him the funding that helped raise money for something he cared about. Now, in other ways, where I became a sponsor to somebody that I promoted through the ranks, this person would channel back information that he would hear during times of uncertainty back to me so that I, as the business leader, would be able to navigate those conversations a little bit more clearly than if I hadn't had the information that he gave me. So he went out of his way. This is someone I ran a campaign to promote and became, one of the most senior in my team. He would go find information about what others are talking about, even my peers, what is being said in rooms, to come back and let me know, all very professionally done, so that I have that information, so that I could look wise in the rooms that I was walking into in times of uncertainty.
Right. That's beautiful. And I love how you've added that practical aspect of really telling what it is and what it is not to drive that clarity. Now, moving on, another aspect that I really wanted to discuss in today's conversation is in one of the posts I came across this 4 biases that you mentioned about. Now, the tiptoe, prove it again, maternity wall is something that we can live with, at least I can live with. The one thing that really caught my attention is the tug of war, because personally I've experienced it a lot, not just as an individual, but as a person who was leading HR. So we women are often pitted against each other with this false sense of scarcity, and scarcity brings about the worst form of insecurity. So, I mean, someone who has really built communities and seen the positive outcome of sisterhood, how do we really break this stereotype and build true sisterhoods that pulls all women up?
No one warns you that sometimes the hardest bias to face isn't from them. It's from the people who look like you. When I first learned about the 4 biases that women face, like this tug of war bias, it hit me hard because it explains something I had felt but never had words for. The tug of war bias happens when women who have had to fight their way up end up pulling the ladder up behind them instead of extending a hand. And maneuvering it was painful because it wasn't coming from where I expected. It came from women who should have been allies, but instead saw me as competition. At first, I took it personally. I tried harder to prove myself, tried to win them over. But here's what I learned. It's not my job to shrink or apologize to make others comfortable. It's not my responsibility to fix someone else's fear or scarcity mindset. I navigated it by anchoring it back to my purpose. I wasn't there just to survive the system. I was there to change the experience for myself and whoever came next. And so today I'm choosing to extend the ladder anyway, even when it wasn't extended to me. And this is what every woman should do. Because leadership isn't about how you rise, it's about what you build when you climb. And if I have anything to say about it, the next generation won't have to fight each other for a single seat at the table. They'll build bigger tables.
That's so beautifully said, Uma. And I think that's something which will just deeply resonate with lots of women around our contexts or the way they've seen the world, if they would have seen the world like us. Saying that, moving on, another reality that we see a lot in the present world is this entire concept that you call as career quakes. And they are real, and we are seeing it all around us. And these are moments that completely shake your identity as you have known it for maybe years, 15 plus, 20 plus years. And it's tough, it's difficult. There's no two ways about it. And in that, we talk a lot about resilience, but not as much about boundaries and the pause also that we need to take. You have really modeled it very well, what it means to hold on to purpose and protecting one's well being while navigating this path. So, how have you stayed grounded, and what is the best way of really navigating career quakes?
Let's talk about career quakes. Resilience isn't just about surviving the quake, it's about knowing when to redraw the map entirely. Career quakes don't just shake your job, they shake your identity. It definitely shaked my identity. And if you're not careful, what I learned is that the instinct to be resilient can trap you into a survival mode where I found myself constantly rebuilding on the same broken ground. And I had to learn this the hard way, is that surviving a career quake isn't just about bouncing back, it's about boundaries and resets. It's about choosing what pieces you pick back up and what you leave buried in the rubble. So when I went through my career quake, the redundancy, the loss of identity, the silence where there used to be structure, I realized I needed stronger boundaries around my energy, my self-worth, and my vision. I stopped giving emotional real estate to people who didn't value me. I stopped over-explaining why I deserved to be in certain rooms. I reset my own definition of success, not based on titles, but on freedom, alignment, and impact. And I learned about resilience, that without boundaries just leads to exhaustion. I was exhausted. And when I started building in those boundaries, it led to reinvention. So I think you don't survive a career quake by pretending nothing happened and move on to the next thing. You survive by honoring what cracked open. I had to honor what cracked open. I had to dare to rebuild on stronger and truer ground.
Right. Um, I love the point that you mentioned on when we are talking about boundaries, which is decide on the things that you want to pull back in rather than just going whole hog and trying to be resilient. Because that's what organizations or that's what the corporate world has taught us, that you need to be resilient. So that brings me to a point, Uma, is that picking up the specific parts would mean, to my mind, I may be wrong, please help me here, would mean that you are aligning yourself to the purpose basis which you want to live your life. So, number one, what is the aspect or this understanding of purpose over here when you are really picking up the specific pieces that you want to be there in your next innings?
Purpose is such a big word. It's being used everywhere. I'm gonna talk through this in the way that it means to me, because for the longest time, because I was the only surviving biological child to my parents. They lost two kids, adopted my sister, had me. And so I was the survivor, and I had to prove why I survived. And that became my purpose, the fact that I needed to earn and be known and get all of these accomplishments and awards and titles, because I had to prove that I existed for a reason, for good reason, when my siblings didn't. And you go through life trying to make sure that you can, at least for me, I never wanted to worry about money. So that's what I chased from the very beginning. And when I had more than I needed was the point that I started thinking about building a community. And that's when, together with Helen Deuce, we started Lean in Singapore 9 years ago. And that's when I started realizing what it felt like to build something that's bigger than yourself. So this is where I come back to purpose. I kind of anchor on that. Is this something that's bigger than yourself, that doesn't come from a place of ego? And if nobody knew you were doing this, would you still be content and happy and joyful about doing that? And so when I was made redundant and I looked at the pieces on the ground, that was one of the pieces that I brought with me.
Mhm.
The others I had to learn how to leave behind. And I think you are constantly questioning yourself. I am by no means in a position where I figured it out. And the biggest, most powerful thing that helped me was to be quiet, to not move, and to bring stillness into my life, which was really difficult because I operate with a zoo in my head every single day. And I had to learn how to get rid of that zoo before new thoughts could come in and take shape for me to start listening.
Right, right. That's beautiful, Uma. And I love the way you shared anecdotes from your life. That is something that so many of us can really connect to. I'm loving this conversation, but the sad part is that we will need to draw a line or a closure. So, one last question to you, Uma, is that a lot of organizations and leaders have truly made an attempt to move the needle on diversity, sponsorship, equity. Is there any example of a leader or an organization which really stood out to you as a beacon of hope? And would you like to share that with us?
One, yeah, it's a great question. Real change doesn't happen because of policies. It happens because someone with power decides to use it differently. And for me, this was one of the leaders I got to work for, Duncan Hewitt. He really stands out for me. And during my time in tech leadership, he wasn't someone who just talked about diversity. He sponsored it in rooms where it mattered the most, behind closed doors, where decisions about promotions, opportunities, and budgets were being made. He didn't wait for formal programs. He looked at the leadership slate and he asked, where are the women? Where are the people from underrepresented backgrounds? And he didn't stop at the asking. He made it a requirement that candidates from diverse backgrounds were not just included, but truly considered. He made sure women had access to visibility projects, to mentorship and sponsorship, to career defining opportunities. And he didn't do it quietly to avoid backlash. He did it publicly, signaling that this was not charity work. This is not a checkbox. It was smart leadership. He even wrote a book about it. And what stood out wasn't just the initiative, it was the consistency. Year after year, new leaders rose through the ranks, leaders who might have been overlooked in the old system. And I think that's the difference. Real change doesn't come from checking a box. It comes from leaders who are willing to spend their capital, political, financial, reputational, to build a different kind of table. And once you've seen what's possible when someone truly sponsors change, you don't forget it. And just to give you a small example of something he would do every day, because for me, it's about the micro moments. When we had to operate virtually, a lot of our leadership meetings were over Zoom. And to make sure that every woman had a voice at every meeting, he would private message each of us. I didn't know this till later. I thought he was just private messaging me. So he would say something like this. He would say, Uma, I'm about to bring this topic up, and I want you to come in to talk about this, which was specific to the businesses I ran. And so, number one, he gave me time to formulate my thoughts. Number two, I knew the cue when to come in. And three, I had a chance to say what I needed to say. And then the moment I say it, he would double my voice, because like it or not, the voice of one woman is half a man, right? So um, that small acts is what I got a front seat row to watch for almost 4 years.
Right. Beautiful. I think that was so inspiring and something that can be so easily incorporated in some leader's life if he or she truly wants it to. So, in this cusp of credibility, visibility, trust, and influence, I think I'm sadly saying that this is the time when we'll have to end this particular episode. So, to our listeners, this conversation was more than just a deep dive into power and presence. It was a reminder of what it truly takes to lead with intention, especially as women, as there were lots of systems which were not particularly built for us. Saying that, any last thoughts, Uma? It has been extremely inspiring listening to you. Saying that, anything that you would want to leave our listeners with?
Yes, I would say that throughout my life, the two most powerful decisions that I've had to think about, which I believe applies to all women, is number one, whether or not you choose to have a life partner and who that partner is. And number two, having a circle. And circle are not your group of friends. They are people who understand and are at the same place in their work and life as you, that are able to hold the mirror to your face and tell you the truth without a friendship tax. That has been the two most powerful things that I've had to think about.
With that, we end today's conversation. And if today's conversation challenged you, made you pause, or give you a language for something that you felt but never voiced, this is just the beginning. Keep listening, keep questioning, and keep creating moments that truly inspire others. Thank you.